Hi, I'm Geoff. I'm a senior associate here at Taylor Vinters, and welcome to the grand opening, the first in the series of season 4 of the Founders series. We are back for another season with a whole host of new companies to speak to. I'm joined today by Deirdre O'Neill from Hertility. Deirdre, welcome.
So I am one of the co-founders of Hertility. I'm also a dual qualified lawyer. I actually did my master's in medical law, which lends itself greatly to Hertility, even if I didn't end up specializing in medical law. And my master's focused on the global regulation of biosciences. So there are great synergies with what I ended up doing in spite of what I actually worked in. I worked in venture capital in another law firm.
Other law firms are available.
I was in the venture capital team at Cooley, and then decided to join forces with my identical twin sister and our amazing co-founder Natalie, who's an ovarian biologist, to found Hertility. And we basically came at it from 3 different angles, all of us having different interests and reasons behind why we felt this was really, really important. Natalie, as an ovarian biologist, was working on preservation of cancer patients' fertility before they undergo treatment. And she essentially realized that, it's not just cancer patients that need preservation of their fertility, it's all women. And Helen was working in the lab and realizing that there was test tubes of people with the same age as she had, and yet she was not even considering having children or family, but people were already undergoing IVF, and it seemed crazy to think that we're sort of in a world that we're not thinking about this at the time, even though it's really, really relevant to all women. I obviously was working 19-hour days in a law firm and noticed that it had an impact on my reproductive health. With our combined backgrounds, Helen being a molecular geneticist with specializing in reproductive health generally and a 10-year lecture at UCL, and me working in venture capital, recognizing that there was no one else doing this, and companies with sort of half the ability raising capital for causes that were nearly as worthy, we all 3 decided to join forces and set up something that we don't see as just being a company, we see it as being a mission. So we're very research led, we're very much mission driven to kind of change the status quo and to pioneer new methods to diagnose and prescribe, and also just be part of a social change. So we're actively trying to change how people perceive reproductive health generally. That's one of the things that we're driven kind of every day by, every woman having a different story, and everyone we speak to has something that they have to say about how they've been treated or how they haven't been diagnosed, and that's what we're looking to change.
It sounds like not a small mission to undertake by any stretch of the imagination. I know it's been kind of referred to and coined as the kind of the reproductive revolution, which I love that phrase. We will come back and revisit that. And obviously you work in a similar area to the areas that I work in terms of venture capital. It's quite a plunge to leave that kind of job, which I know, as you said, the long kind of hours and the long days, but a relatively secure income and a relatively secure environment in terms of a job, and actually take the plunge as a co-founder of a scale up. You've kind of touched on, kind of having a realization yourself that it was having effects on you and your own health. Was that the primary kind of motivator for wanting to make that change, or what kind of factors kind of influenced that?
One of them was that I found that there was so much that we could potentially do. I felt I was quite inspired by, even though she's my own sister, I was inspired by the research she was doing. And, she's actually working in gene editing and CRISPR, and the advances in science that she was working on, and where the law just hadn't caught up. And that really, really fascinated me, and it always did. The plunge is more direct, because you're right, it's really, really hard to actually say, right, I'm going to go for broke, no salary, no nothing, no perks. I guess that the attitude is that, mindfulness matters, and mental health and well-being and all of these things are really, really important. And that's the rhetoric, or that's the kind of tone that they take. It's not the reality. And in actual fact, if your eye twitches for a month and a half, that there's something fundamentally wrong. And I noticed it with myself and some other colleagues as well, that it had an effect on their reproductive health, and that you notice symptoms, and you notice that your period had either stopped or was delayed. And in my circumstance, I knew I was actively trying to have a family, and the circumstance combined with the lack of sleep your body's like, no way, not in this environment. I'm not doing it. And because I've, an identical twin sister who got pregnant with real ease, I thought I would be the exact same. And genetically speaking, I should have been, but environmentally speaking, I wasn't, because I was in such a grueling environment. And that made me realize that if this is the cause and effect, if this is the impact, it's just not worth it. It's just one of those things that it all lends into the reasoning behind why we're doing what we're doing, because there needs to be more awareness, there needs to be more conversation, and there needs to be more work or support in the workplace for the reality of people having a life outside of long hours and deals.
What's been the biggest, I guess, skills that you've realised that, oh yeah, actually that the legal career set me up quite well for this role?
Every single thing I do, it's reviewing commercial agreements, it's creating bespoke agreements between labs, between clinics, between doctors. It's the fact that we've grown from a team of 3 to 33 in a year. Everyone needs an employment agreement, and there's data and privacy policies and all of these things. It is more than full time. It's nothing else would have been sufficient. And I actually think that the work that I've done and being a lawyer has just been a really, really amazing thing for the company, I guess, because it's a resource that we constantly use. And it's something that I'm learning all the time, and I'm growing all the time as a lawyer, because I'm adapting various skills, whether it's an employment law or data privacy or anything else, and general commercial agreements. It's actually, I really, really enjoy it. So I think actually it's been a really, really great thing to have.
Perfect. Almost like the best of both worlds.
It really is. Yeah, it's a bit scary though. There's a lot of things at risk, and it's all on my head. But no, it's actually been really worthwhile. And particularly having, a background in venture capital throughout our raise, it's been really, really great. I felt like I had a bit of a leverage having that inside track of, normally VCs are able to kind of scaremonger and say, well, this is what the norm is. I'm like, no, it's not.
You've just mentioned the raise, and it should be a congratulations in order. But for those watching who don't know, in June, Hertility completed a 4.2 million seed fundraising for its kind of first major capital round, which is awesome. What were some of kind of the main challenges you faced in that race?
With what we're doing, it perfectly marries up biotech and femtech, and there's no one else doing what we're doing. So once we kind of got that traction, and once people kind of got word on the street of that, it was much easier for us. But in the initial outset, you're sort of balancing between wanting to spend time raising and wanting to actually spend time building your company. And the fundraising process is so time exorbitant, and it's so exhausting, because every investor you speak to has a different nuance on what they want to see in the deck that you present, and someone else, and then you spend ages changing that. And the time involved in it is the hardest thing. We actually made a concentrated effort to say, we're actually going to focus on grants rather than investors, because we're so much more eligible for grants in terms of the research that we're doing, and I guess advances that we're pioneering. And that was a really, really great move for us. And I think the biggest problem with investors was, and this is not sort of an anti-male rant, but it was the pale, male and stale, where they didn't understand the problem. And I think it's becoming, each day we see something else in the news about reproductive health and menopause and fertility and why it matters. And we saw a shocking amount. Why would women care? What's your market? 53% of the world is our market. What are you talking about? Is there a market for this? It's getting people to realize the importance of this, or realize what we're fundamentally trying to do. That was a stumbling block.
As a company, really proud of an all-female founding. So that should just be something that's like accepted and the norm. But it's still not. And you read a lot in the reports and research about access to capital for kind of female founding teams, and you've seen it in your venture capital life. Is that something that, having seen it both as a lawyer, but then also kind of fundraising for Hertility, is that something you feel is getting better?
I think there's a massive gap. I think people are actually talking about it and acknowledging it, but without actually doing something about it. So it's become part of the sort of rhetoric of like, we back female founders and we look to support, but there's a long way to go before that's represented in the numbers. I think we had an advantage in that we've got a formidable background in terms of the fact that, between the three founders, we've got 23 years of university experience. But it's one of those things that getting people to recognize that I think it's actually quite difficult. You definitely notice that there is a dismissiveness, a lack of value, I guess, in recognizing the power of an all-female team.
Do you find that kind of translates or kind of correlates to also hiring employees? Do you find that women engage more with the mission and want to be part of the team? Or?
We do. We've got we're about 99% women in our team. We've had a huge number of people who went on the fertility journey and became a really big fan, and then approached us when they saw that we had vacancies available on the website for roles. And actually, it's been really, really refreshing, because you don't get someone who wants to have a job. You get someone who wants to join the mission, and that's really important for us in terms of hiring, because it's so much ingrained in us that what we're doing is like fundamentally important. It's not just a job.
How's the dynamic at kind of a founder level with kind of two identical twins? And obviously you've got Natalie as well. But
Natalie is a great mediator. She is a saint in lots of ways, because she sort of just, it washes over. It's like she's a sibling as well in ways, because she just is like, all right. But we actually have a great dynamic, because we come at things from a very different angle, because she's a lecturer in genetics and she's kind of done a very academic route through going, a master's and then PhD. As an academic and scientist versus a lawyer, we look at things in very different ways. And sometimes it's very frustrating, because, they joke that I basically was like someone who had to be reconditioned into society, like someone in the military with my working ethic was reply now, did you see my email? Where are we on this? And very much like results driven now. Whereas the scientific side is, this is a concordance study. We could take 10 years on this. And I was like, we need to find a happy medium here, because I'm on the 10-minute fix and you guys are on the 10-year fix. And in the beginning, I think it was like a struggle to find out, I guess, to find where we were in terms of priorities and things. And they saw the importance of the response time to VCs and things, but not to the extent that I would. They kind of be like, we can reply whenever we want. And I'm like, but no, it's actually amazing. It's amazing working together. It's something that we actually work in very different ways. And so it works really well, because we contribute both very, very different things. And our interests, in terms of Helen's kind of pioneering all of the research and the medicine behind it. And I'm then plowing behind the nasty commercials and the corporate, the corporate side of things, which is fundamental for a company too.
True. It's almost like the good cop, bad cop, isn't it? Being like the perfect founder. Not that lawyers are bad cop at all, obviously.
Yeah, we have a running joke that my title is not Chief Commercial Officer, it's Chief Ball Breaker, and just constant cracking of the whip.
I love it. It's good though. It's needed sometimes as well. So especially with academics as well, just to almost get that kind of commercial focus at times. Well, turning to the reproductive revolution and delving a bit more into that. So I guess the big question, we've spoken about fertility and kind of the motivation behind creating it and kind of all the different factors. How does the product that Hertility has now, and how does that work if there are women who kind of want to use your service and your product?
The general overview is that we're kind of on a mission to basically revolutionize the world of reproductive health generally, by educating, by empowering, making knowledge completely the norm, breaking away taboos. And by doing that, we're offering basically specialists in every area of reproductive medicine. So gynecology, fertility, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, and menopause. And we're trying to do this in the most accessible way to women, so that it's in-house experts from the comfort of your home, but you do it via a blood test. So how the journey goes is that we have created what we call a virtual health assessment. And the virtual health assessment takes into account all of the clinical guidelines and diagnostic criteria for all of the sort of reproductive bodies and gynecological bodies. And the questionnaire that you do, it's 5 minutes, but it takes into consideration 1,500 variables. And then from the answers to the questions that you give, we then curate and send a bespoke testing package for the person to do. So essentially you do all the questions, and then by whatever you've answered, we'll be able to tailor your test and test the appropriate hormones for you. And where it varies is if someone is on contraceptive hormone, etc. And the results, then you do the finger prick blood test, which is just a single vial of blood. send it back to our partner labs, and the results are uploaded onto your personalized health hub. And it's really, really important to us that we don't just give results that can't be understood. We've taken a huge amount of time in making sure that the results are completely bespoke. So there's over 54,000 variables, and that they're really, really easy to understand. There's nothing worse than receiving information which is daunting enough without being able to understand it, and furthermore, without being able to know where to go from there. So your report will be, every report is reviewed by one of our in-house doctors. It explains your results, what they mean for you, what hormones we tested, why we tested them, what do they mean for your general life and your well-being overall, what they were responsible for. And then we have articles linked to, we've got our knowledge center, which links articles that may be relevant for any aspect of your reproductive journey. And we've really gone, we've got a full team of 20 experts now and 12 or 13 researchers now, and everyone working on making sure that we have the most comprehensive database of information on reproductive health that's really accessible. And so the idea is that, you know, if you have something within your results that you want to talk about, if there's something generally you aren't really sure of, we have in-house experts, again, in all aspects of reproductive health, that you can have a teleconsultation with. And if it is the fact that you wanted to go on for scanning, you can get a scan or go to one of our partner fertility clinics. So we've only partnered with HFEA rated clinics. So that's the Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority, highly rated clinics. So we've partnered with those so that someone has the journey all the way. So they're kind of felt like they're taken care of for each step, because there's nothing worse than the idea of having potentially a problem and then this odyssey on the internet of where do I find help. So we're trying to streamline a process that is otherwise really, really difficult to navigate and make it as easy as possible for everyone.
It's all about empowering women to have the information they need to be able to make decisions, but then also, if there are, and hopefully not, but if there are any issues at any time, to give them the kind of the access that they need to treatment and help.
Yeah. And the reality is there are issues all the time. 1 in 3 women has a gynae issue. 1 in 10 has endometriosis. 1 in 10 has PCOS. And so these are symptoms and issues and things that are happening every day to women. And the biggest problem that we've had, and one of the most revealing things we've encountered, is that of the fertility users that have done the journey, they've gone, 1 in 5 of them has a previously undiagnosed reproductive condition. So they have just put it down to just, women's problems. And this is one of the things that we're trying to press ahead, to plow through this concept that pain is normal, or that this is just something that you deal with. And it's similar for whether it's a gynae issue or a fertility issue or a menopause issue. For too long, symptoms are dismissed and counted as being just women's problems. But in actual fact, there can be fundamental reasons, structural or otherwise, that are causing these symptoms. So we're really on a mission to just ultimately provide for proactive, not reactive diagnostics.
It's just quite interesting that you said, there's a lot of issues that a lot of people have that they perhaps don't realise they've had, and they just put it down. Do you think society, it's always been a taboo, but because of that, there's not the information out there that means that people can kind of talk about it? Or there is quite a lot of information and research, it's just people don't have access to it because they don't appreciate that they're issues?
No, it's a combination of all of those. So for one, there is a huge lack of research into women's health. And that's because women's health is difficult. Women have an Easter cycle, their hormones change hourly, daily, monthly. And so they've always typically been really, really hard to do concrete, research on. And sort of 40-year-old Caucasian males are really easy to do research on because not very much changes. And so when we went back and kind of looked at what is the accepted norm, what are the textbooks saying, we were so shocked to see that it was, things saying women are generally happy to be consoled about their infertility. I was like, what women are? Like, when was this? Who was this written by? Why wouldn't someone want to have some form of preventative help rather than a pat on the back and they're there? This isn't. Sorry, you've missed the bus. This is, if you consider that the World Health Organization defines menstrual and reproductive health as being a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. And it's not just the absence of a disease or infirmity, it's all matters that relate to the reproductive system and its functions and processes. And that gives an idea of how important this is, that it comes within every aspect of your life. And similarly, your menstrual health and your menstrual health has now been classified as the 6th vital sign, because it reveals so much about your health that it's now alongside your temperature and your heart rate and blood pressure. There's a lack of education generally. There's a lack of training for doctors. We've spoken to NHS doctors who are crying out for more information on this, because they're told they don't have the resources to provide help. So, it's definitely not something that we're saying, oh, boo on the NHS. They're doing enough. They couldn't possibly take this on as well. It's too much of a mission. But telling someone certainly to go away for a year and try harder. Well, firstly, in terms of symptoms, it's always go on the pill. There's this standard answer that seems to be that all women come back with it's hiding and masking symptoms. If you have pain, go on the pill. If you have bad skin, go on the pill. If you're moody, go on the pill. And that's actually the worst thing you can do if you're trying to uncover that there's something fundamentally wrong, is mask it for 5, 10, 15 years. And then realize that there's an issue when you're suddenly expect to get pregnant. And the other aspect of it then is if someone is trying and they go to their GP and they're told you have to have been actively trying for a year before you're eligible for treatment. That's like telling someone with cancer, come back in a year when you've got a tumor and then we'll consider you. It's counterintuitive when we know our reproductive health is in decline to make someone wait longer.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of I think, culture, lack of education, and lack of insight.
Perfect. So it's a good job we have, obviously, Hertility on the starting the reproductive revolution and kind of trying to switch that, I guess, to go from reactive to proactive and kind of turn those timetables around.
Yeah.
What's from people that have gone through the process? I know you mentioned one that ended up actually joining your team, which is, I guess, the probably best bit of feedback that you could have, that someone actually has been through the process and then wants to actually join and help. What's the feedback been from users, how they've found it compared to what they had kind of option wise beforehand? Or
they had no options beforehand. That's the greatest thing about this, is where else do they go? There's no one else doing this. We are literally the only company in the world that offers this level of comprehensive testing with access to OBS and gynae and all of these consultants all under one roof. And that's one of the key differentiators for us, is that the idea of just having a solution on the NHS that doesn't exist, or going to a fertility clinic, the comparison to that is it's a psychological as well as a financial barrier to go to a fertility clinic. You have to be at a certain stage in your life. You're usually in a committed relationship. You've been actively trying, but frankly, these days you shouldn't have to be any of those things. And you certainly shouldn't have to be in an opposite sex relationship, which is one of the barriers on the NHS. You can't be in a same-sex relationship, which is, in the year that we're in, there shouldn't be any barriers to just finding out information about your reproductive health. And so that's one of the biggest things, is that we've had so many really heartwarming stories and really scary stories too, about people who have checked in on their reproductive health and just casually checking in. We had someone who's as young as 22 who realized through her test that she was in essentially early menopause, so she's in primary ovarian insufficiency. And had she done the usual thing that every other 22-year-old does, you typically wait for a decade and then say, well, now I might try, she would have had no chance whatsoever. And instead she froze her eggs and was able to preserve her fertility. And it was one of those things that her kind of, I guess, her testimonial and her story about this is that it genuinely changed her life. And that's the thing that fuels us.
I had no idea either about the whole opposite sex kind of requirement on the NHS either. As you said, that doesn't sound like something that should be happening kind of in this day.
Especially because 100% of the LGBTQ plus community will need assisted reproductive care if they want to have a family. So to have that kind of barrier is crazy. And we really, really want to pioneer something that opens up a journey for that community as well as everyone else. You
mentioned one of the reasons that you kind of left the law was because of the kind of the work-life balance and the aspects. And what's Hertility doing as a company kind of in that respect?
It's funny you say that. It's as you grow as a company, you suddenly have to scrabble around to realize that you need more than just the kind of in-house rules that from dealing with your twin sister, and all of a sudden you need to have proper bespoke policies and things that people, when you're hiring, more and more accomplished people to help you grow your company, you need to have more and more things that appeal to them. And we've actually kind of had some have fun trying to think about the ways that we can offer something that's different. Like we're having a period power down day if you need to have a day for your reproductive health, but the balance of that is thinking, what can we offer men then? And needing to be fair on that. But we are, we've started as a remote company, so there's flexible working for anyone that needs it. We have our own counsellor. She's our fertility counsellor, but we offer everyone fertility counsel or general counselling, one-on-one counselling session if they need it. And we generally just try and be really, really supportive of everyone's life. We all understand that everyone has things that go on outside of work, and we just are we're a very, very supportive, close-knit company.
So I guess that the two questions I always like to kind of end this on, that the first is kind of what's next for Hertility. So obviously we started out on the mission, you started out on the mission, the fundraising's in, you're growing the team, you're hiring, the platform is kind of taking shape, and as you said, you're kind of starting the revolution now. So where do you see kind of the future for the company, as much as you can say?
No, I'm happy to say that we are seeking total global domination. We are really, really excited about the fact that what we're doing is very novel. The future for us is pioneering novel research. So our research combines endocrinology and reproductive science and gynecology and machine learning. And so we're running a lot of research trials in order to kind of close knowledge gaps and to pioneer new and novel diagnostic methods. And we basically we've got sort of a proprietary algorithm that determines the most suitable hormones for people, and we're hoping to basically be the 10,000 steps for reproductive health tracking. So we launch our app later this year, and then what we're hoping to do is have the journey end to end. So it's not just about testing your reproductive health one-off. It is 10, 15 years ago, nobody really thought they had to get to this barometer of 10,000 steps. And that's just one facet that isn't really, it's not very useful in terms of your day to day, but our hormones dictate our hair, our skin, our mood, our weight, our sex drive, our sleep, everything to do with our being. And yet we are completely clueless as to what they're doing. And so what we want to do and what we want to be is the sort of the home of women's health and reproductive health generally, and pioneer reproductive health tracking for everyone from menstruation through to menopause. So that's the big goal. In terms of sort of active steps in being more granular on that vision, we are launching in Ireland Q1 next year. We've just launched a polycystic ovary syndrome package, which it was a really, really big thing for us to launch, so that it's a differentiator, that we have a specialist who's one of certainly the UK and probably the world's leading experts in PCOS. So we're really, really excited to have him. And we're also launching menopause testing in the coming months.
So lots and lots going on.
Loads. Yeah.
Yeah, no real let up. But one bit of advice you would give to someone in your shoes, or starting up or wanting to start up a company?
Where to begin? I think just having a clear idea on what it is that you want to achieve, even if that's going to the moon, being so determined that you're going to get there. And people said we went PhD at level on our startup because there wasn't a boundary that we weren't willing to cross. There wasn't, everyone said just launch an at-home test. We were like, no, it's not good enough. It's not enough. It's not about testing one biometric. It's about testing a series of things so we get a holistic picture. And everyone that said you're trying to do too much, it made us think, but that's because there isn't enough. And I think not being put off by being pigeonholed into doing one thing is really, really important, and kind of having the tenacity to stick to what you want to do and know where you want to get to, even if it's a huge, huge mountain. Just persevere with it.
Perfect. Amazing. Well, I mean, hopefully, we wish you all the best and kind of in that journey, and hoping that you do kind of tick off all the things that are coming up. And it's hugely exciting. We've obviously got some questions in, and we've got about 15 minutes or so. In terms of those working at Hertility and the culture that you're trying to create there, is there anything that Hertility does, with your background, having kind of been in that highly long-houred environment, is there anything that Hertility does to kind of ensure that it doesn't have that culture, and that, people are enjoying, enjoying their work and getting the right work-life balance outside of kind of the kind of policies that you touched on earlier?
Yeah, I mean, the work-life balance, I think, is a lot easier now that we're in a culture of working from home. We have kind of the option to work in an office as well for people, and generally people love that sort of the combination of being able to do that. I think it's very different when you're working in the corporate world and you have deal after deal after deal and different time zones to work with. That was one of the primary things of my career was knowing that there was never ever a 6 o'clock finish, because 6 o'clock is always someone else's 9 a.m. and it's one of those things that it's a lot easier when your team is here, although we have 3 now in Tel Aviv as well. But we're very, as much as I say I crack the whip, we are a very sort of supportive and collaborative team, so that if there's someone who is struggling with something, we have a call every Friday that we walk through what people are working on, and the whole team joins, and we're very much focused and center on collaboration and how can we help and how can we progress things. And I think once you've come from a really harsh background of working, you don't want to inflict it on anyone else.
Yeah, no, of course, no, I like it. It sounds perfect, doesn't it? It does sound like that, and the way that I think people should be running their kind of companies, especially. So
it's a lot easier to do now that people have at least the ability to be at home, and sometimes people join in their pajamas from their bed, and that's fine. It's one of those things that you get your work done.
Yeah, it's almost one of the kind of the benefits, to the extent there are benefits of kind of the last 18 months, isn't it? It's kind of forced that change in people a lot quicker than perhaps I think was trending that way, but it's forced those kind of changes on people a lot quicker than perhaps they would otherwise. So which is good. There's a couple of questions on kind of fundraising, as you'd expect, because always when you've been successful, people always want to know how you've done it and made it look so effortless. There's one kind of specific on grants, which is a question around, when you mentioned kind of taking grant funding, because actually that turned out to be quite a more accessible route. Was that mainly, accessing UK style grants, or were there kind of international grants and global grants that you were able to apply for as well?
We applied for a few, but we were awarded the Biomedical Scholars Grant. So it was a UK government innovation biomedical grant, which it's highly competitive. And we were basically recognised as being one of the UK's leading innovators in science and technology. So it's because of what we were doing, it was quite specific to research and clinical symptom biomarker-based modelling to predict the risk of developing reproductive conditions. So, we were very, very particular in that. There are so many other grants that are, women in tech or that are quite generic, and the competition on those is really, 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 really high. And because they're so broad, they're very hard to actually nail down. You can also waste a huge amount of time and resources, and I will warn other people if they're applying for them. Some of them are really just fact-finding methods to find out as much information about the company as you can. We applied for one, and we actually looked back afterwards and thought the amount of time we spent, the amount of resources we gave, and the amount of, I guess, information we gave away, which we really wouldn't have were we not desperate, was actually really unjust, because I think the likelihood of you being granted it when there's a million applicants is crazy. But so just apply with caution.
There's a couple of questions around, as a company, you've got a real social purpose and kind of wanting to empower women, but then there's also the other side of it, which is you are a company and you are scaling and wanting to grow, and obviously that requires investment from investors, and investors buy into what you're doing, but then also have their own investors, and funds have their investors, and there's that kind of this tension, I guess, to make a return on their investment at some form. So I guess the questions that we had are kind of two parts. One is kind of how you found that kind of tension between having obviously the strong mission and wanting to empower, with kind of also growing the business and that more commercial side of it, but then also kind of, I guess, the importance of choosing the right investor from to get someone that actually really buys into what you're doing first and foremost, and then kind of worries about returns latter.
For us, I think, had we been more focused on the commercial returns, we may have gotten research, or we may have gotten investment earlier. But in actual fact, we were so motivated by the altruistic element of this and the research and the education piece that it's almost like, and it's a struggle, because you don't want to dilute your mission and your values in order to just promote something that someone wants to hear. And we were really, really lucky. We were actually really picky on who our investors were, because it's so important that they understand what we're doing and not just understand how much money we're going to make by when. And so the investors that we have are so unbelievably supportive of the mission, and the people who've been involved are really, really great. So we haven't even felt that sort of pressure, because I think they're genuinely impressed by the kind of the research, the pioneering research to reduce diagnostic times, which ultimately has its value. It's undeniable that has its value, but to just detract from what we're doing by saying that it's a profit generating, it's really great for us to know that the revenue goes straight into the research, and they're okay with that.
We see it a lot when we're advising companies as well, that there's many different types of investor, and there are investors out there which are just, they will give you the capital and they will give you a lot of capital, but they expect the return. But I think it's important sometimes for founders just not just to take that, and actually to look into who your investors are, what they believe in. There's a whole host of social impact investors now that really do buy into it. So,
but there's also a whole host that recognize that that's what they're supposed to say, but it's so easy to see through that. And we spoke to quite a lot of investors, and where they say, "Oh, we're really into women's health," and like, are you? In what way? And this, you scratch the surface and you recognize some people's true motives, and like the reality of a lot of them is like, oh, this is a buzzword, femtech, what's this about? And the reality is that, like, you can actually see when someone gets it and gets what we're trying to achieve, and that's really, really refreshing. And we're really glad to have really good investors that they buy into the mission.
But there's a couple of questions around collaborations and partnerships potentially in other spaces, and whether that's something maybe one day you consider in terms of surrogacy services and kind of imaging methodologies and other biomarkers for hormone testing.
Yeah, so we the partnerships roadmap is expansive. We've partnered with My Surrogacy Journey already. We partnered with them early this year to help anyone on a surrogacy journey, and what we want to have is an availability for anyone, no matter what they're trying to achieve in their reproductive journey. And so we've made that partnership, and we've had a really good few referrals through, and happy people with that kind of process. In terms of other partnerships, so we've partnered with Mumsnet, and they have a trying to conceive community, and it was really, really important to us that we try to reach as many people who are clearly on a forum struggling to find answers about what's going on with their reproductive health. And nowadays you shouldn't have to wonder, and particularly with this. So we're launching with Mumsnet next week, which is exciting. There's loads of different avenues in terms of partnerships where we want to partner with UCL and King's College to educate, as well as providing sort of like workshops and webinars. And we've launched our workplace benefits platform, which is essentially designed to help people in the workspace feel like they are supported by their employer, and to know that they have a journey they have a support on whatever journey they need to take. It's very isolating if you do have an issue and you don't feel like you can talk to anyone about it or do anything about it, or even take some time away from work. This sort of combines what would be 3 appointments into one, and you don't even need to leave your home. And so it makes it a lot easier for people to access really quick and affordable care. For what we're offering, it would cost it's for £149, it would cost you upwards of 1,800 in a fertility clinic. So we're really sort of breaking the barriers so that it's accessible for a lot of people. But there are countless partnership opportunities for us in educating or in workplace benefits or otherwise.
To hear you speak, it does sound like you're well on the way to global domination, because there's so much.
We also partner with the Lady Garden Foundation, which is a charity. So they're on supporting, because it's Gynae Cancer Awareness Month, and so we've partnered with them this month to give donations for all of the 5 types of gynae cancer. The
thing that strikes me the most is how much fertility has done in quite a short space of time, like relatively, in terms of like just the reach. Yeah, Exactly. Those 19-hour days have just been put to different use, but it's incredible. Deirdre, it's been amazing. We're coming up to the end of the session, but I just want to say thank you for agreeing to speak to me and for your time today. It's been it truly has been great to kind of to speak to you and to get your insights on kind of fertility and but also just the wider issues that kind of we've highlighted throughout the kind of the last hour or so. It's been amazing. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you as well to everyone for your questions and for everyone that's kind of attended and watched. It's been great to have you all here. Not that we can see you, but I'm sure you're all there in your thousands listening. I have a few plugs, like shameless plugs from our side. We have a new founders handbook that is going to be released shortly, so watch out for that. It's going to be hopefully a big benefit to lots of different founders out there. Obviously we've got the rest of Founders Series season 4, so my colleagues will be interviewing a couple of equally inspiring companies coming up, so again, watch out on our social media for the dates for those. And obviously, as I said at the start, this is all being recorded. So if you've absolutely loved the last hour, as I know I have, you can download and rewatch it as many times as you like. It will be on our website in a few days' time. So Deirdre, thank you very much and I hope you have a good evening.
Thank you. I'm just going to do one quick plug as well. If people would like to follow and support and just follow on socials, we're obviously, we've got a full page dedicated to our research and clinical trials. So, share it, like it, subscribe, get involved, support the mission.
Deirdre, have a good evening, everyone else. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.